we will kick off. So first on screen, according to my screen, we have Lucy Chihandae. Lucy is joining us all the way from the US. Thank you for making time. She's a co-founder and creative director at Two Sisters Media. She's a business owner. She's passionate about Africa's narrative, like all of us here. And she's passionate about tools, such like the one we're talking about today. She's also a seasoned writer. And interestingly, she has been writing since age 9. I think after Lucy speaks, I'm just going to stop here because you are the expert and I know nothing. But thank you so much for making time. There's so much that Lucy has done in different, areas in storytelling. So it's a great privilege to have her as a multimedia creative here. Thanks, Lucy. Do you want to say hello to the team?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abimbola. Oh my God, that was so glorious.
I'm glad.
I am in awe of myself because of your introduction. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be a panelist here or a storyteller at the fireplace with everyone else. I'm really glad to connect and to talk about storytelling. This is a great opportunity for us.
Awesome. Awesome. Nice to have you, Lucy. We'll be back to you. Next, I want to introduce Yinka Olaito. Yinka is on. Could you please turn on your camera so people can see you? Yinka is another media comms professional. He's based in Lagos, Nigeria, and he's known for his work in comms, in journalism, and in podcasting. Speaking of podcasting, Yinka hosts a podcast called The Difficult Conversations Africa. And if you check it out, you realize why he called it The Difficult Conversations Africa. He's really, speaking to people around pertinent issues and allowing just the variety of opinions to come to the surface. So it's a really beautiful thing to have you in the room with us. Yinka, do you want to say hello?
Thank you, Abimbola, and thank you everyone that is here today. It's a privilege to be here. I am looking forward to this conversation where we can all learn and relearn. And thanks to other storytellers that will be leading, Lucy, Tony, and everyone.
Awesome. You said like a true podcaster, unlearn, unlearn, and relearn. I love the storytellers in this team. Next, I'm going to introduce Larry. Larry, I almost mistook him for AI, and you will know why when he speaks, right? But Larry is an accomplished Zimbabwean media professional. He's a writer, he's a digital strategist. He has a huge portfolio. He's done work in radio, in television, screenwriting, content creation. So you can see that we're a fun bunch, right? People with, expertise across, several things. He founded and he has been running 3mob.com, which is a multi-award winning platform since 2008. That's over 17 years ago. He also owns a publishing company, 3 Men on a Boat. It goes on and on and on. He has podcasts, essentially jack of all trades when it comes to this storytelling business. So thank you so much for being with us. Larry, do you want to say hello to the team?
Hello to the team. How are you? Is this it? Am I done?
That cannot be everything. I know I've set you up. Everyone wants to hear the voice. Please give them the voice.
I have no voice. This is AI.
I love it. That's fantastic. And we move on. Yeah, he's using AI as his voice, the same way we've taught AI how to, tackle bias. Anything is possible, guys. Expand your mind. Next, I'll be introducing Tony. Tony Kamau is based in Kenya. She is the 2024 Sundance Amazon MGM Nonfiction Producer Prize winner. Do you see how lengthy that award is? I hope that shows you how heavy, the work and how solid the work she does is. She tells stories of African change makers, much like everyone, in the African Narrative Collective. And she collaborates with diverse teams to craft impactful narratives. She's produced documentaries for BBC, for Al Jazeera, for Bloomberg. And she has, she got an award, the DuPont Award at the Sundance 2024. I can read and read and read, but Tony is amazing. And it's a beautiful thing to have her here today. So I'm just going to pass the mic to the next storyteller. Tony, let us hear from you.
Yes, yeah, so thank you so much for having me here. The DuPont Award was actually for Softy, which is a documentary that came out in 2020, and it also premiered at Sundance. I've had two documentaries premiere there, and I've worked with a lot of international film teams. So talking about bias, whether it's my own or whether it's, dealing with collaborators, is something that's part of my work. And I'm really happy to be here with the rest of the esteemed panelists and just have a discussion about this amazing use of AI. AI is not as scary as we all think it is. So I'm excited
Right?
to have this discussion. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I want to leave the mic to Tony now because she already knows, she gets it. She's here to convince everyone what AI is doing. Thank you so much for that. And last but definitely not least is our partner in producing this amazing tool. His name is Echo Duka. One of my favorite ways of introducing Echo is that he's a brilliant writer. Echo is an accomplished novelist, and he brings a beautiful combination of his storytelling and data and AI. He's the AI expert here. So Africa No Filter produced this with the AI shop, and Echo is the CEO and co-founder of the AI shop, which is an innovative startup. And I can tell you for a fact, they are solving global problems, with the beautiful expertise they have in-house. His background, Echo, includes co-founding Zindi, which is Africa's largest community of data scientists and AI practitioners. So if you're thinking AI expertise, just rest assured knowing that we have everything in-house. So I'll pass the mic to Echo. Please say hello to the team and we'll kick it off.
So thank you very much for the glowing introduction. And I like to think that that I straddle both. So I try to straddle both worlds, as it were. So the narrative side and the technology side, and I think we are all learning as we go. So very pleased to be here, and I'm looking forward to learning as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I've gotten a few questions. Yes, the chat will be on in a bit, so please bear with us. For this conversation, there are two hashtags that we are going to be using, so feel free to share on all your social media platforms. It's Africa Bias Buster and the Africa Bias Buster Day. And today is Africa Bias Buster Day. So happy Africa Bias Buster Day. We'll be moving on to the meat of the matter, but first I want us to play a game. And it's going to be between the storytellers who are sharing the experience today. We're going to write a story. Okay, I think we should start with a poll. A poll will be going up shortly before the game. So anticipate. We just want to know a little bit more about you, where you're joining in from, and all of that. So please feel free to feel free to answer, and we'll move on to it. While you do that, let me let the panelists know what the game is. We're going to be writing a story about Africa. We want to do a live demo of the Bias Buster. So if we take turns, we go around, I will say a sentence. I'll start with a sentence. I'll call your name, you add another sentence. We go around like that. And the aim is to create the story with the least amount of bias and stereotypes ever written about the continent. And we'll put it on the Bias Buster and see just how good we are. I want to tell you, I cannot predict the results. I don't know if we'll do well or not. Fingers crossed, but we are all narrative experts here. And we should be confident about it. So as we wrap up the poll, can I have the screen showing the Bias Buster, please? And then we can create. Oh, I'm seeing people in the chat. Hi, everyone. Saint Mark Mwangi. Hello. Hi from Kenya. Nice to see you. Awesome. Are we ready for the game, my storytellers?
Well,
Please.
I am.
Sort of.
Sort of. Fantastic.
Let's see.
Okay, let's do this. I'm going to start and then I'll pass on to Larry, and then Larry, you pass on to whoever you want to pass on to. The first sentence goes, my favorite thing about Africa is the weather. Larry, your turn.
Especially in Zimbabwe, where I am right now, where it is a bit cloudy, but it might rain. Tony.
Yes, and in Kenya, the weather forecast is usually a suggestion. Um, right now, it rained in the morning. And I think it might be sunny tomorrow, but climate change is real. So the weather is not predictable. Over to Larry.
Okay, let's pause a bit. Let's make sure our AI got everything. It would be cool if AI was dictating this, wasn't it? Anyway. It might be sunny, the weather is unpredictable. Is that where you ended, Tony?
Climate change is real.
Oh, climate change is real. Fantastic. I see someone who said hello from the teapot-shaped country. What's that country? That's very interesting.
Zimbabwe, we shaped like a teapot.
Are you serious? That's cool. Nice. Okay, great. Who did you pass on to, Tony?
I passed on to Larry. Larry.
Oh,
Larry passed to you, so you need to pass to someone who didn't pass to you.
Oh,
So,
sorry. I'm playing this so badly. Lucy, passing on to Lucy.
However, the weather here in the US is as unpredictable as a teenage girl.
Oh, wow.
When it's hot in the summer, it's humid, or it rains excessively.
This is interesting. I'm waiting with bated breath.
Oh, I added when it's hot in the summer, it
Yeah.
rains excessively.
Oh, this is interesting. David Plummer says the ability of our weather forecasters to get it right is another legacy we want to get rid of. I don't even know what to say. I like the way Tony said it's a suggestion. But yeah, Lucy, who are you passing this on to?
I'm passing it on to Echo. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes.
So there are many people who will claim that Africans are very predictable.
Okay, and we have, is that everyone? Is that all the storytellers? I think it is. Did I leave anyone out? I said Yinka.
Yes.
Yinka. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear what the guy said last, but for us here in Lagos, Nigeria, the weather is cool and it's predictable to a certain level. Though once in a while it beats your imagination to your prediction. This morning there have been rain, which I am not expecting till towards the end of March. But in all, it's a cool place the weather is good and it's very sunny, and we are enjoying our best.
Okay, thank you. The AI will try to capture as much of that as it can, because we are putting this in a story to try with the bias buster. Okay, do we leave it here? But it sometimes beats your imagination. Okay, great. So let's run it and let's see how well we did. Check your story. Da-dum, da-dum. The suspense. Okay. All right.
Gosh, what?
You know what? Everyone be
Oh,
calm.
yeah.
If you've just joined us, what we're trying to do is a live demo of the tool we're discussing today. And we have narrative conscious storytellers who have crafted this story together. And we've just gotten 2 out of 5, and we'll see.
Okay.
Recommendations. Avoid using gender-based comparisons or stereotypes, such as comparing or predictability to teenage girl. Okay. Be cautious with generalizations about groups of people, such as Africans are predictable, and ensure that statements are clear and free from potential bias. 1 minute,
Okay.
let's react to that. What do we think of this result?
2. Those are only like 2 comments. Like this Africa bias buster is harsh. It's very harsh. It's giving me trauma from
Oh,
school.
I
wow.
think, I think any creative work is in trouble because we tend to use quite flowery language then.
Yes.
I think that's a very fair point. That's a very fair point. We will get into the meat of the matter. I just wanted this to be a showcase, right? And so I would just like to direct the next question to Echo. Echo, you are the AI expert. You are literally the combination of narrative and AI personified. I would like you to share with us. I know we did this together, in partnership, with Africa No Filter, but why AI? How did this start? What made you think AI, to help, narratives, considering what we know of AI and Africa? When I say considering, I just want you to bear in mind that for me personally, the default setting whenever I think AI and Africa was always a quite limited, understanding. For context, someone in our community, another storyteller, put a prompt into Midjourney to say, can you show me, create a photo of a Black doctor treating white patients? And AI could not compute. There was a giraffe in the operating room. That's how much it's passed. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'm just asking you, Echo, you have more insight into everything. Why AI, and how did it occur to you to use AI, right, to solve problems of bias and stereotypes in African writing?
Sure, thank you. I think it goes back to the beginning. So when in 2022, I believe it was, when ChatGPT came out, myself and my co-founder, we got very interested in large language models and in generative AI. I think it was particularly pertinent for me because as a writer, I was very interested in this thing that supposedly could write as well. So we spent a lot of time learning about the technology, learning as much as we can. So when we were approached by Africa No Filter to help them with a tool that could, that would be able to detect bias and stereotypes and make recommendations, it was very much what we wanted to do. You are right that, and I think that it's true that for many people, they think that AI is not for them. But when you look at the great advances that AI has made in such a short time, and the ability of AI to touch on very many aspects of our lives, then it has to be for us. And I think it's a good thing that there are Africans, and I'm proud to be one of them, who are using AI to solve or say something about the African condition. So it was very much a project that hit home for us. One, because I'm a writer, and two, because I'm an African as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Echo. I like the way I'm asking you as though I wasn't there, and I want you to tell me absolutely everything that happened. But it makes a lot of sense. That we keep talking about the agency as Africans, and now we are in front of, how exactly do we use this AI to tell? And there are many ways people are doing it, but it's interesting to hear, this background to it. Just as a way of, cementing this, what are some challenges that came up for you, Echo, in developing this? And just bear in mind that, we've created this, and someone, mentioned we tend to use flowery language, as African creatives, sarcasm, similes, metaphors. it all comes into it. And also to mention, someone asked a brilliant question at the beginning. Whose image is this AI made in? And I'm curious to know from your own point of view, what are the challenges? Whose image, how was this developed? If you could even explain that.
Okay. And I think I think it's useful to think of AI as a general purpose tool. So it's almost like a clean slate, and you fill it with the nuances you wanted to express. So that's what we did, and we built. I think it's an interesting question to ask, in whose image it was built. I think it was built in Africa No Filters image, in the sense that we took your learning material where you run courses on stereotypes and bias, and we fed that into the AI. So that became its knowledge, or its ground truth. So we built on from that. And I think that some of the challenges we had were around reported bias, where, for example, the piece of writing would be reporting on bias that someone else had said. And initially, the AI would flag that as being extremely biased when it was just somebody reporting. So we managed to fix that. So that was one of the challenges we had. I think it's also important to realize that the AI we have now is the worst AI we'll ever have, because it's getting better all the time. So I think that if we were to come back, to this forum in 6 months or a year's time, the tool will be better, or the underlying tools will certainly be better, and they will be more powerful, and they will be able to detect even more finer grains of stereotypes and bias. So it's a bit of a moving target where the technology is improving very, very, very quickly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And just to add to what Echo has said, bias and stereotypes can appear so subjective. And Echo has talked about reported bias being difficult to flag. There's also the fact that as storytellers ourselves, as woke as we are, there are things that we do not know that we do not know. So if we record that we need to keep learning, how much more the AI, so it's a continuous learning tool, which is why I'm encouraging everyone to make use of the tool and also take advantage of the survey link. We want to hear from you. How is it doing? What do you think about it? How can we refine? How can we make it better? Because that's the only way to stay on top of things. I'm going to send the next question to Tony. I think it's clear, right, that, there's already a need for people to be correct. We created a story as with all our expertise, and we came up with 2.5, and you were like, what, 2? Now, why do you think it's important to have bias-free writing? What's the impact of maybe even unintentional bias in the stories that we tell as storytellers, carrying the African narrative?
Yes. Yeah, I do believe that we can do better if we apply ourselves and get a better score down the line. Always improving. But on a serious note, I feel that as African storytellers, it's very easy for me as Tony, a Kenyan, to sit in a room where maybe I'm the only African or African diaspora and claim to speak for the rest of the continent. I can't speak with authority even for the rest of Kenya. There are so many nuances. For example, I'm doing a story about an indigenous community. And when I did the Africa bias filter check, I got a 4 out of 5 because I was talking about gender. I got a 4 out of 5 because I was talking about gender issues, and it called out something that, like I had my own bias, a girl living in a city, in a capital city, and I have my own biases, even in terms of like how I look at other communities within my own country. So I think something like this, where it's very easy to make assumptions or to have heuristics because you're like, everyone acts like this, or African men are like this, or African women are like that, or Christians are like this. I think it starts to help us to be very specific. Although I would caution for a lot of people, whether you're working in film, TV, or print, to not just stop at using the bias checker. I think it's to look at what has been called out and then go and do the work. Go and do your research, go and talk to people. Because, at the end of the day, I do believe that this is a great tool. I do believe AI is important, but I feel like it shouldn't be a closed system. And we need to speak to, other creatives or people from the communities we are called to represent. And I think that's why, the wider African No Filter community is also important, so that we can talk to fellow creators and storytellers who have shared goals.
I think that's absolutely important. You're spot on. There's many voices that need to be represented, right? And so the more voices float to the surface, the more, I guess, wholesome the picture is. And the community Tony is speaking about is the African Narrative Collective, who are actually the people hosting this conversation. Everyone you see here is part of the collective, and I'm just, privileged to be asking them questions. So we'll get back to that. Lucy, what do you think? What do we stand to gain or lose, from bias in our work, whether we catch them or not? What's at stake?
I think that we have more to lose when we focus on bias. I hope that I'm on. Yes. When we have biases in our storytelling, as someone who has invested her time to read a lot of African storytellers, I notice a number of biases within descriptions of people, just like Tony talked about. And I think that when we put these books out into the world, into the West, where we're trying to convince them that no, Africa is not that way, then we are literally perpetuating the same deception or the same idea that they already have. So we are losing more within our storytelling, our books especially, and that doesn't help. Again, we ask the question, is it that we are perpetuating these stories because the West demands of it, or are we therefore want to make a living off the backs of Africa, in a way, off our own backs, or are we just not informed of how best we should tell our stories? So I go back to what Tony said about being able to connect to the community and get in touch with the people on ground in order to find out what stories can we really tell, because that's when we become more authentic and we're able to step by step build our authenticity and proper storytelling, knowing the truth that's on the ground than what we have assumed would be. So yes, we do stand to lose more than gain.
Yeah, I like how you put it. We have a lot more to lose, from having bias in our storytelling. Larry, I'm curious. You are obviously passionate about narratives and you use several mediums, right, to tell stories. So let's assume in your content creation work, for example, how do you think it matters that you tell stories that are devoid of bias, or what do you think happens if perchance you put in some of your work and the Africa Bias Buster says it's a 1 out of 5? What's the impact of that?
It's a very complicated one because perchance a lot of my work is creative, and a lot of my characters come from the real world, which means fundamentally they're problematic. They hold certain views that are not correct. And I think there is a lot of context for which we should use narrative, bias-free content that we create, especially when you're writing things that have an insistence on making sure that the facts are recorded accurately. Where I tend to delve a lot more into, or dabble a lot more in as far as my work is concerned, is a world in which we allow the biases to play out and allow the audience to decide which one is the space that they find themselves. So it's mostly within fiction, where the characters are problematic. But in as far as this tool is concerned, for our media platform, where 3mob.com, where we write a lot more fact-based content, fortunately, quite a bit of it was more for 4 out of 5 because of going back, having been brought up by a single mother, I've been very careful about how I represent the world because I remember the way that she was treated with a certain level of bias and how her family was treated with that bias to such an extent that I'm very careful about inserting myself as a character within the story. And to finish off in one sentence, when I cover news, I make sure that I am never the character in the story. You never hear my voice. You may pick up that it is my style of writing, but I am not the story. And therefore, that makes it easier to write bias-free content when you need to inform people about things that matter to them.
Wow, that's very insightful. Two things I picked up from what you said. First, allow the bias, show and leave it to the audience to decide. That sounds grand. That sounds like you really trust the audience, and that's fantastic. My only question to that is, do people have enough competing information to compare with such that they can then decide and say, you know what, this is where I choose to, rest my, or this is what I choose to go with. And I think that's a question we can all ponder on. And then to your second point of removing yourself from the story, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Yinka, I'm just going to ask you, you're a podcaster, you're a journalist person, you're in the comms. What's the impact of bias in telling stories as an African storyteller?
Yeah, the impact is huge as far as I'm concerned. And let me start with this. There's a proverb in Nigeria that says that he that will come to judgment must come with a clean hand. Now, we Africans are saying that it is not right for Western storyteller to push us in a stereotypical way. And then we are still strengthening such. We have also read some of your report at ANF, what we are losing for economically 4 point something billion and all that. So for me, what he said that let's allow the audience to make their decision and to raise that, I think is not good. We must do everything possible to ensure that before we put it out at all, we've done our best to understand that based on our level to know that this is where my strength is, and therefore I've been able to deal with biases. Unfortunately, like in the conversation we had last week, me and Lucy and I, many people are not even aware that they actually have that biases. So if you don't know from the beginning, you'll be strengthening a negative stereotype. You will be strengthening the single story that is already there. So I think that the impact is huge economically. In terms of image and branding of Africa, the impact is still negative because at the end of the day, you'll be seen by what you say. Somebody will say that you'll be addressed the way you address. So if you push your biases inside your story, you don't expect them to if you say that we are backward, you don't expect somebody to say you are not backward, but rather you are authority in that area. So I want to say that the impact can be really, really huge beyond like the one that ANF have done. They only focus on economy, but in terms of other issues that affect.
Oh, it seems Yinka has dropped off. So I hope he comes back soon. But what he said that was so striking was, you will be seen as you say. That's powerful. Echo, I see your hand. Oh, he's back. Yeah. Yinka, sorry, we lost
you. So let me just say that the impact, the negative impact far outweigh whatever we can consider as the good deals.
Thank you so much, Yinka. I see we're keeping it broad, and next I would like us to go back on a personal level. As a storyteller, what's the impact to you? And we'll get to that. But Echo, your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that that I think that there is a place for bias. So if one is, for example, writing fiction and you're creating a story around that, if everybody was nice and they didn't have any problems, or they didn't have any bias, they were not flawed in some way, then the story would be extremely boring. But at the same time, I do think that there's a place for a tool like this, especially in the world where we've entered now, where there are very simple stories being told about large parts of the world. And I think it's important for a tool like this, but I think it has more use for stories that serve to impart factual information, but maybe less so in the truly creative sphere where you're telling or you're creating a work of fiction.
I hear that. And I want to say I genuinely enjoy the fact that we have two conflicting thoughts. I would like to hear from the audience if you have questions, comments, bias. There's a place for bias, and we should get rid of it. I want us to go a bit deeper. As an African storyteller, we're not looking at the whole continent now. To you, as an African storyteller, just bearing in mind that the world is awakening to Africa now. The eyes are on us, we are out there, we're being celebrated, we're on a pedestal, so to say. There is a hunger for African stories. Do you think that African storytellers care about whether bias exists in their work or not? Do you think it's something that we're actively seeking solutions to? And it's still the same question, but now what is at stake if I produce a story that contains bias and someone takes my story and puts it on the bias buster and they see 1 out of 5 and that is it? What do I get? What happens? Tony, I want to start with you again.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting, like when it comes, because I mostly work in the documentary space where we're dealing with facts and emotions to a certain degree and perspective, and different points of view. I think that it's really important to have the humility as a storyteller, to not assume that you know everything, especially when you're telling a story about a world that is not yours. If I'm telling a story about, a middle-class woman living in Nairobi and has a dog, like I can tell that story inside out and has dated in Nairobi, I can tell that story inside out. But I mean, if you're telling a story, like, for example, many times I get approached to tell stories in other parts of Africa, as the only African in the room. And I always say, no, you have to have an African from there because we are not the same. Do not flatten us into one experience. So I think that it's very important for us, it's critical for us as storytellers to have our credibility, because when one person gets it wrong, because they like to say that person got it wrong, so all Africans are wrong. It's a responsibility that we have when we get into rooms to bring your true self there and to check, do your fact checking, but also bring other people into the room who would be useful in that conversation. I've come to understand more and more that we have to be working together, so that we can tell more well-rounded stories, because one person can't know everything. That's just my general belief.
Yeah. I think that's very valid. You cannot flatten us to one experience, so more voices are needed, and we need humility as storytellers. I just want to read out this comment in the comment section from Esther Sami, who says biases help us relate to one another. For example, TikTok has helped us discover that we were all raised by the same African parents. Haha, I added the haha. Biases become bad when they impede personal and continental growth. However, there is always a place for bias. I think that's super interesting, and we'll get to that. I would like to ask Larry, the personal, you always seem shocked whenever I call your name. What do you think is at stake on a personal level? Why does this matter?
I'll give you my own experience. Like earlier on, I always try to tell the story from my perspective because I don't want to assume anyone else's. On our platform, 3-MLB.com, for a long period, because of a desire for what I'd call overcorrection, we started having a situation where whenever there was a positive general story, business opportunities and so forth, would always put an image of a woman. And whenever there was a problematic story, would put an image of a man. And that was during a period in which there was a lot of angst towards men and issues around them. So while trying to come across from a position where we felt we're doing the right thing, in that we were saying, look, we want to produce more content that showed women as having of being empowered and having space in which they have agency and so forth. We overcorrected by creating a negative bias towards men. And that was something that I sat down one day, and it was sort of while I was watching TV, accidentally watching an episode of Friends, when I realized that the way they moved the characters around and the way they created the humor out of every character, everybody was equally vulnerable. And so that is a way that I then said, look, I have to be careful about the representation that I create in as far as our platform is concerned, so that we don't create a situation where there are people who, based on my angst or whatever the case may be, that I want to overprotect as if they have no agency of their own. So it's important to have that continual conversation with yourself, especially if, because I come from a school of thought where, say, when I publish something, other than the intellectual property, it no longer belongs to me, it belongs to the world. So what is the representation? When I pass away, what will the world know about the life that I lived or the people that I interacted with and the story of the world I lived in? And did I represent the people that exist in that world as accurately and as honestly as I could have? Whether it is within fiction, because ultimately a story, in essence, will become basically flat, because you will decide who is your protagonist or his antagonist. But that's now me being technical about the way I write. But ultimately, super important to always have that conversation with yourself, and to loop back to something I said earlier about biases. You have to be aware that you are being biased. If you're honest about yourself, that you're biased towards certain specific issues, be honest about it, so that even if you get a 1 out of 5, you must be aware of the fact that you're intentionally biased to achieve a specific objective, and not give the impression that you're objective when you're subjective.
That's a beautiful place, to say here, Larry. Thank you so much for that. That the point of awareness is literally what birthed this tool. We are all vanguards, right, of narrative. We know what a good story about Africa should look like. But many times, inherently, we are perpetrating the very stereotypes and bias that we don't want to see. And, it's not a pointing fingers, oh, you are the problem and you are the problem. It's, do we even know that there is a problem? And so that's one of the things that the AI Bias Buster was developed to help us discover. It doesn't have all the answers like we've discussed, because there's some flowery language that we use as creatives that it cannot capture. But what it does is help us reflect and think. If it's being flagged, what is this saying? And I think that was a very beautiful way to put it, Larry. Thank you. Now, I want to ask everyone here, all the storytellers in front of me have used the Bias Buster tool. If this is some time for some vulnerability, Lucy, I'll start with you. When you used it, you had early access, you examined your work. Were you surprised by the feedback? Was it as you expected? What were your thoughts?
So yeah, when I ran it through, I thought, okay, this is a story that should definitely pass the test. And then it gets 2 out of 5. And I'm going through it in my head. I'm literally screaming, because I'm like, no, it can't be. It can't be. This is supposed to be free of bias. But then, the mentions of certain things that were said or implied without proper structure, or, and I was like, okay, I get it. I understand what's going on. However, there were those that scored highly, and I didn't expect it. And those came through, like, say, paragraphs where there were conversations between, or dialogue between the characters. And a lot of their expressions, maybe they expressed, they were talking about things that were probably related to bias, but it's because it was in context of their dialogue, then it wasn't flagged, but it was more comprehensive. So because then the AI was like, yes, I understand they are talking about something that relates to them in that regard. So that was quite interesting for me.
That's beautiful. And just to mention, you can, there are 2 ways you can use the Bias Buster tool. In the beginning, we typed, but you can also upload your documents up to a full novel. So feel free to do that. But I'm happy to hear that. And I'm going to get to Echo and probably ask what his reactions to that are. This seems like a very good feedback. But Larry, or maybe let me go to Yinka first, actually. Yinka, when you tried it, were you surprised when you examined your work?
Yeah, I was not totally surprised. I have done, first of all, what I did was to check with my own writings and then check with BBC and VOA writings.
Okay.
And I think it was coming 3 and 4 over 5. And I was asking question, what is in this that has biases and all that? But I would say that the AI it has done a great job. At least it puts me on the toe to think again before I do the next story. To be able to ask myself, okay, with the recommendation, how do you work around it? Yes, I got one of them got me 4/5. I said, well, it's still not 5/5. So there's this consciousness for me to begin to think and say, right, oh, you might have the biases that you don't know. And that's why I echo what you said, the other guy said about being aware is the first step. If we are not aware, we can't do anything. Awareness will help us to, and if you now have a guide, it's an opportunity to listen to the guide once in a while. We know that machine may not be like human being, but at least if it is very close to, somebody will say, if you are very close to your goalpost, we will help you. But if you are far from it, we can't help you. So I think that this here Buster is very close to what we're thinking. But more importantly, for African story writer, and I think that we must always understand and to think about it, that we need to constantly do reorientation against certain biases and certain words that we use.
That's very valid. And apparently you are a great writer. You are a good vanguard. 4 out of 5. I'm proud of you. Did any one of the storytellers that I've not spoken, did you have a different experience when you used the bias buster? Or was there anything that stuck out that you want to share with us? Tony, I feel like things stuck out to you. I'm not calling your name, but I feel like
to be honest, I enjoyed my experience with the bias buster, but I also I ran through things which had been thoroughly researched beforehand. Because when we're working on documentaries, we have to do topic summaries, and that requires a lot of thorough research. So I was happy with the project, and then also I was looking at things that were rooted in my own experience or that were easily relatable, like things about women, entrepreneurship. If I'd scored 1 out of 5 there, I would have been very worried. But I thought it was, yeah, I thought it was a good tool, just in terms of flagging things that were positive that I had taken for granted. I thought that was good. I think also the gender thing, as a woman, sometimes when I'm looking at stories through a gender lens, sometimes I might nitpick at some things. So some stuff was flagged. And it helped me just think about like, okay, maybe I should do a little bit more reading. Maybe I should take a little bit of a step back. But I always try and make sure that my projects or whatever I write are read by other people who I trust and in my circles, and not just people who agree with me, but people who disagree with me. Yeah. And I think that this could be a very useful tool, especially for people who are beginning, to write and, might have a lot of biases, maybe because of limited world experience or just knowing the same sorts of people. I think we're also anomalies as storytellers. We're also anomalies as storytellers because we're built to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We're built to understand, other people. I would be curious to understand if someone who's not a storyteller, what their experience would be,
That's true. That's a very
looking at this bias buster.
I think Larry. Oh yeah, Lucy.
I just wanted to add something. I run several stories or several articles through the bias buster from VOA, Al Jazeera, Creative Brief, so many different articles. And what I realized was that the app worked favorably with storytelling, or rather content that was sort of news related, very impersonal in a way, very impartial, so to speak, in relation to creative storytelling. So, and I think that's something that we talked about, you know, considering flowery language and the bias that we sort of insinuate within creative writing, and like stuff that is fact-checked and researched, and you're literally just presenting the facts. So there was a difference between that I noticed. And my question was, how are we going to work with AI or with the BASTA in order to have it incorporate or understand creative storytelling?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think Echo would take that. I just want to hear from Larry, because Tony raised a very good point about being curious about how non-storytellers would experience the tool. You are a storyteller through and through, Larry, but at least, you know, content creation is also part of what you do. Did you test it in that regard, and were you surprised by the results?
Well, that's the other thing. Storytelling. My passport says I'm a writer, so fundamentally that's what I am, and that's what I identify as. So, but there is a lot of work that is, you know, research based. I've done fellowships, done research, and that sort of thing. And I took a couple of papers and put them in there, and it did have a very good way of responding. What I wanted to say before I completely answer that question is, what I enjoy about the tool is that it gives very plain language and it's explaining what it has picked up. And I think I'll give a lot of credit to Echo with that, because a lot of the times some platforms, AI platforms, tend to get almost they're self-infatuated. They're hallucinations. This one is not pretentious. It's great. I'd say language that could be understood by a 14-year-old quite comfortably, and that's what you want. In as far as non-storytelling, I think this serves the function that I think it should serve. That when you are being creative, we don't want the AI to take the creativity out of us. We should be able to tell stories from the perspective that we live in the world, because the worry that is there, and I suffered from this earlier this year because I'm writing a play at the big right now. I went in and I said, "Hey, look, hi, ChatGPT. I want to create a structure for this play," and you know, it was a very exciting, you know, back and forth, and it gave me some creative ideas. And when it was done, I suffered from writer's block because it had completed the story, and therefore I had nothing to write anymore. I had the complete experience, and it gave me its biases, and it started telling me how I should tell the story because it was writing it from an American point of view. So I had to delete everything and start writing the story again, because I had to go to what is the world that I create in my head. So I went back to pen and paper and started writing the story. So from a creative point of view, I think have friends, sit down with them, tell them that the story makes sense. They'll tell you this character doesn't look real. They don't, no one speaks like that in Zimbabwe. And yeah, no, Larry, you don't speak like that. So no, that character like, so that's where creativity is. This should enhance our writing in as far as us telling factual issues about our communities, not even countries. Because if you look at Zimbabwe, there's so many different communities, even within the neighborhood that I stay in, because I live in the capital city. So what you have to do is, this tool for what it is supposed to do is amazing. It will get better as we input more, as the model improves, but what it intends to achieve, I love it as it is.
Thank you, Larry. I don't know. I didn't even pay you, but this is such a beautiful ad. Like, you've gotten everyone. I'm guessing people now are like, where is the app? Show me the app. Please, you have the app. Feel free to use the app. Echo, I'm coming to you. A lot of things have come up. The AI shop, you know, you developed this, and I have a couple of questions, and I'm hoping, you know, we can pack it up with that. First things first, is 5 out of 5 possible? Everyone says the bias buster is harsh, right? Is it possible? Do we even want it? is another question, because we've had, opinions around, we need bias because, it says this, it says that, and then it comes to the last question, which Lucy raised. What does the future look like? Is there a way we can actually trust AI and the bias buster in this case to understand creative writing, such that we're not worried that, you know what, you don't know what you're saying, don't take the creativity out of me, let me be creative, but also help me find biases, whether I'm reporting the bias or not, and things like that. So it's a huge question I've asked you. Feel free to answer it however way is possible.
No, sure. And I think it's a great point. So just to pick up on Lucy's point about can the bias buster work in the truly creative field, like to help with creative writing? We didn't design it for that. Maybe because to do that would be a much harder problem, because you don't want to take the creativity out of the creativity process. And I think that if you put this bias buster into a creative work, you might get the Merchants of Venice without Shylock, and then it wouldn't be a story. So I think that that's a different problem which we did not address. But I think more for the factual storytelling, I think that's where the tool comes into its own. And I'd just like to end on the comment made by Yinka. And I think that if the bias buster helps us to think and reflect, then I think it would have succeeded. And I'll tell a very, very quick story. And I remember being outside my mother's house in Ghana, and there were two small boys. They were about 9 or 10 years old. One was riding a bicycle, and he tried to do a trick and he fell in the gutter. And his friend, the other 9-year-old boy, immediately began to laugh at him, and he said to him, "Do you think you are white?" So suggesting that Black boys can't do tricks on bicycles because they're only for white people. So if something like this, the tool like this helps us to think and reflect, and especially how we relate to the young ones, and help them to believe that they can be and they can do whatever they want to do, and we step away from these very, very subtle and small things we say or don't say or do, that somehow artificially creates a ceiling on their achievement. And I think that if the bias buster can contribute to that, then I think we would have succeeded in our job.
That was so well put. Thanks, Echo. I think absolutely it's reflection. It's the humility Tony spoke about. It's not flattening everyone into one experience. It's the thoroughness of the work, the consciousness we put into our work. Like Lucy and Larry have mentioned, Yinka stopped to think, okay, what is the problem with this? Where have I gone wrong? What can I do? And I think that's what, we as storytellers, as custodians of narratives, that's what we owe to the people we're telling the stories to. As my final question before we get to the really fun part, which is taking questions from our audience, I know I didn't pay you to do ads before, but if you were to tell another person to use this tool, what would you say? Who can use this tool? How exactly do we socialize it across the continent to different storytellers, whether I'm a comedian, I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm a photographer who seldom, write stories. If we could just take 1 minute to go around with panelists, I'll start with Yinka. Who can use this, and how can we socialize more people to use this tool?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's something that I would like to try and allow to talk to people about. But I will always say, like Larry, I picked something from what he said, that don't forget your humanity. Your creativity should not die because the AI says that you are 2/5. Otherwise, because AI is a machine, you are not a machine, you are a human being. So whatever your results, I will gladly recommend people, but I'll say whatever your result is, just a pointer for you to begin to be more conscious, not to depend on it absolutely. Otherwise, you might even kill your own creativity as a storyteller or whatever. So that would be my point. Apply this, but at the same time, don't give up on your own creativity, your own intellect, or your own knowledge when you are using it, whatever the result is. Even if the result comes with 5/5, there must be something that you yourself are still arguing about within that maybe I have done way better. So that's my point.
That is so beautiful. It is a learning tool. It is a learning tool. And the more we learn, the more it learns, the more we learn. It's a beautifully vicious cycle. Larry, your last point, who can use this and how do we get it to the world?
Well, I'd started off at universities and colleges. I'd take it to even high school. Not so much from 1 to 4, really, because I think people are still forming their opinions of the world. But I think anyone who wants to communicate with the world, especially those who want to tell stories about Africa, you want to start it there because those are these are the people that will tell the story of the future of Zimbabwe, of Africa going forward.
I know, just flag the Zimbabwe flag. You are allowed. No problem. Lucy, yes.
To ask, and I know we're coming to the end of this session, but I wanted to ask something which is pretty much a reverse of what we've been talking about. So the Africa Bias Buster app is supposed to bust bias towards Africa. But my question here is, as a writer, or as a creative writer, if you're writing about the world, say you're writing about Africans in Europe or Africans in Asia, how are we positioning those characters to not reflect a certain bias towards these countries or towards these people? So is the app going to work on our biases in relation to the West? I mean, for example, as a child, I always thought white people never tell lies, they're always rich. And these are things that you find that you would end up writing in a story based on what you were exposed to growing up and how you place your story. So is the app going to flag those as well?
Echo, I'm tempted to pass this to you.
And I think it will now. So you can certainly try that, and I think it will. To the extent that it does not, it's something that we can fix and tweak. But I think it's set up to do that now.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucy, do you have any more bits to add, or you just wanted to ask us that grand question?
Oh, I just wanted to ask the ground question.
Okay, no worries.
But also I have been extremely enlightened on the discussion going forward and the comments in the section. I remember reading somewhere or listening to a conflict specialist say that about 10 to 15% of the world are actually self-aware. Most people are not aware. So if you're not aware, then you're not aware of the biases you have, which means that we're really going down a rabbit hole in trying to educate ourselves and trying to get to that point where we understand who we are.
That's a very good point. Tony, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with everyone else that university students, high school students, this would be a great tool for understanding what bias looks like and checking it. If it's coupled with now exercises where you interact with people who you've written articles about or communities you've written about, because I always believe that nothing beats the real world. We should avoid technology being a closed loop. And tongue in cheek, I think this would be great in family WhatsApp chat groups where people are talking about politics. Or community WhatsApp groups. I think it's a good tool, just for general fact checking. And, I'm excited to just share it with different people and also just see how it evolves. So thank you for making this tool.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for using and for sharing. I would like to jump straight to the questions. The first one, I think some are in the comments, but please use the Q&A question so I can ask. Babatunde Daud Adebayo says, bias at times comes from the storyteller's framework of knowledge and becomes essentially part of what makes the story. I agree. What do you think about striving for transparency rather than trying to get a 100% bias-free media content? Any takers?
Yeah, I think that for me, transparency is important. Let people know where you're coming from. And be honest. People will flow with somebody whom they've seen the honesty and the transparency in them than somebody who is hiding on that technology to push something that they may not want to take. So I think transparency will come by putting caveats into whatever you write and say, oh, like for now, when we started, you said, oh, can I appeal to everybody that I wanted to record this thing? That's transparency. And people will flow with you more with transparency and honesty than any other thing, in my opinion.
That's very, very fair. It's the genuineness that makes us connect, right, as storytellers. So thank you so much for that question. I'm just scrolling through. There's so many cool comments, to be honest. Tala Dolat Sashi, pardon me, says, I think there are far too few data engineers across the globe creating the AI who have the robust cultural and country-specific literacy needed to avoid bias. That's not a question, it's a comment, but it's one that I quite agree with, just because we've talked about we need to have multiple voices floating to the, to the surface. So thank you so much for that comment. Wow, very long question. I don't even know where to begin. Interesting. I think we've also done a good job of just mentioning back and forth the comments during the thing. I think that's all. Please use the Q&A session if you think I'm not finding your question. If you have any questions for any of the panelists. Yeah, I see there's Africa is still thin on literature. This is from Esther Sami. What is the AI using to determine what is bias and what is truth? Wow.
Should I take that? So what the AI uses in this instance is the Africa No Filter study material on stereotypes and bias.
Well, and just to again mention that this is a continuous learning tool. So the more we give it feedback on how we feel about it, the more we're able to refine. Same person asked the question earlier, if Africans even know how they ought to be represented, just because Hollywood has skillfully programmed how we perceive and see ourselves, and now we have Nollywood, where the Western world now thinks all of Africa is comprised of Nigeria. So essentially, do we even know what truth looks like so we know how to flag? I think that's related to the previous question, but Lucy, you're nodding like you have something very apt to say. Let's have it.
No, I really like the comment where they say that as much as Africa is opening, Hollywood has positioned themselves in such a way that they're telling stories about Africa for us to consume, and we seem to be teetering on the edge of truth. Is this who we really are, or are we something else? While on the ground, and I will relate to Uganda, is that our storytelling, it's very young still, and the stories that are being told or that started off portray Africa or portray us as poor. It's always a rags to not even riches, but a rags to almost the urban area type of storytelling. But it's not very enticing. The stories don't tell of a glory of who we are. And the younger voices now are beginning to look at it and say, no, we grew up in the urban areas, so we have another perspective, or we want to tell the stories differently, because it is just, it's a sort of innate rebellion against the norm that has been. And we have bigger forces to fight. You're fighting your own in the country, and then you're fighting Hollywood. So I think it's a tussle for us right now in having to place ourselves in a place where we can truly represent ourselves without bias. I mean, there will be some bias, but I think the bias is, like you said, that, bias can be, maybe should be, is kind of good in a sense of how you tell your story. It's probably about saying, okay, we are more urbanized. Maybe we're in Kampala more. So therefore, I'm going to tell stories about people within Kampala so that it's more relatable, since the consumers are mostly within Kampala, other than telling the story of a girl in the village, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's...
Yeah, That's a very good point. I want to read this comment by Mark Mwangi, which I feel just really captures the essence of why we're here today. He says, as someone raised in an urban setting, fed on a large percentage of American, British, African, post-colonial literature, consumed copious amounts of Hollywood, Jamaican reggae, and schooled in the Kenyan educational system that is 844, geared basically to raise employees, no shade. There will be lots of biases in my stories, but now with the tool, I'll be more conscious of the same. Kudos to you, Mark Mwangi, because I feel that's exactly what we've been talking about today. There will always be bias. Yes, we can rely on AI to help us flag, but inherently it lies with us as storytellers to be humble enough to appreciate that we are one person, we do not own the world. We have a role in inviting people, right, to contribute and tell of their own realities and things like that. So thank you so much, everyone. We are wrapping up this conversation. If you had questions, we have a final video just to remind you how this tool works, and we'll be sharing a QR code where you can either click the link in the comments or check the QR code, use the tool. Please feel free to share all feedback through the Google form. Let us know how you find it so that we can continuously improve it. Thank you so much to Echo from the AI Shop. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Yinka. Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much for making this a fun conversation. I had fun. I enjoyed myself. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. And I hope we will continue to keep this going. So can we have the video up? And if anyone has any questions, please feel free. We're at Africa No Filter on social media. Tag us, share your comments, share your questions. Find us on the website. We're here for you.
Introducing the Africa Bias Buster, your creative companion for telling better stories about Africa. Let's see how it works. First of all, you log in or register, just as you would for any other app. Then you type or drag your document into the app. Now click on Check Your Story and watch the AI go to work. Let's try with this piece of writing about African entrepreneurs and see what the Bias Buster has to say. The tool spots something interesting, phrases like uniquely resilient and qualities others might lack. While these sound like compliments, they're actually subtle stereotypes that suggest African entrepreneurs are inherently different from entrepreneurs elsewhere. The AI doesn't just flag these issues and assign a score out of 5. It gives you specific recommendations to strengthen your writing. But if you're not happy with your score, just hit the Try Again button to submit a revised version. You can also use our Share button to send your results to colleagues or save them for later. And if you're ever stuck, our FAQ section is packed with practical tips and real examples of bias-free writing about Africa. Are you ready to take your writing to the next level? Let's get started with the Africa Bias Buster.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, I see things about that. That was AI speaking with a Kenyan accent. Someone said it's not Kenyan accent. Again, there are many variations of Kenyan accents from what we've learned today, right? There are several realities. So yes, thank you so much to all our storytellers. Special shout out to the African Narrative Collective. We really appreciate your support. Thank you for having this conversation with us. In the absence of any further comments, I'd like to say thank you and goodbye and have a wonderful evening. If you want to access the tool, the link will be in the chat. It will also be on all our platforms. There should be a page with the QR code for you to access it before you leave. Please try and let us know how you find it. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Abimbola.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Very much. Thank you.